Hey, well, welcome to the Dream Labs. Dr. Contrast Live here. I hope everybody is well, and just thought I'd take a moment here today and give you a little bit of an overview. This is part 4 of this G12 series, and I think it's pretty important to take the time with this thing. As I said yesterday in some of the conversation we had in yesterday's program about being very conscious now of taking this thing into a product line and making some real commitments as far as design is concerned, and also the overall variations on themes, expanding it into some things maybe in the future here with some 3D models of some speed form studies, getting some poster graphics and some illustration work and so forth to put in our web store. So I want to be very careful to take the time today to go back and maybe just institute a little bit of a review, bring up to speed as to where we were yesterday. And I'm going to spend some time today doing some very interesting things in an abstract form, and it's going to be a little bit of a development series looking at speed form character. I'm going to spend some time today working with Prismacolor pencil and also some Conte crayon, just do some very quick emotional empathic sketch studies and elevation, look at section analysis and maybe some interesting character based on what we've got in here as far as the overall theme is concerned. And on that subject matter, I really felt as of yesterday, and again, the input from the gang tuning in, really had some great input on where we were and where we arrived at the end of the day yesterday in that stream. Spent yesterday going through a lot of review and tuning in on what the forms are going to look like. For example, maintaining the width, maintaining some of the same original origin G12 nose character, but dropping it down a little bit, take some of the mass out of it, give it a much more of a GT program. Pardon me, racer series with this front sponson, or this canard that kind of gives us a little bit of downforce to kind of rush air through the process itself. Then really spending a lot of time getting the canopy down and some airfoil systems and really shrinking it into a system where it's wider and it's lower and it's got a real stance to it now. There's some really powerful, I think, elevations and perspective front and rear. Some real character to it, but the main body of the whole process was to dissolve and really resolve what was happening back in this rear three-quarter area. Some of the earlier sketches had this intake up on top of the flanks. It just never worked out from a surface point of view. It didn't look like it belonged. It was just like a stuck-on afterthought, and really wasn't pleased with the overall format here. So that's where we ended up yesterday with yesterday's exterior front three-quarter. And then we went to this study. This is like a rear three-quarter, getting a lot more business-like back in the tail section. And again, really playing up this whole idea of this intake system being much more streamlined, much cleaner, and a lot more aggressive looking. Again, in this view, the rear three-quarter, you can really see where the real stretch and getting that canopy to drop down and be a lot meaner and get this whole insect, what I call like an insect gesture under tension, to begin to really take on a personality of its own. So that was really interesting as far as getting these things resolved. And as I said, yesterday's stream was really dedicated to getting these elements put together, all predicated on moving forward now today with some speed form studies and doing some section analysis in the shape itself, and maybe looking at some of the little mirror images to kind of pick up on or detail back into the actual final illustrations and so forth. So that was the rear three-quarter study. Then the last thing we did was going into what does this thing look like in the plan view, for example. And even though we're maybe miles away from certain things, there are a couple of pieces here that I looked at the plan view in review here that I'd really like to take a look and adjust. In the black line, the actual exterior of the plan view perimeter here, this is a little bit on the wide side because, as I mentioned, at LMP prototype machines, overall width 75, 76 inches. So the red line represents where we might have to shift the overall body form to get that into that variation or to have that approved. For licensing and registration and so forth. Also, the thing that looked at this was maybe once we thin it down a little bit and get the proper width in the plan view, we're about maybe 10 to 12 inches shy, just about probably think about 18 inches shy of the overall length. So I want to really pull this rear section a little bit further rearward, which might necessitate coming a little bit slimmer too. So if we have time today, I might take a look back at this plan view study and begin to make some adjustments on that. If not, we'll certainly pick it up next Tuesday when I go live at 2:30. And on that format next Tuesday, I'm going to start looking at refining the plan view and hopefully get some good section studies here today resolved in these empathy studies we're going to do. I'll explain that in a moment here. But coming in on Tuesday, now that we've made some real revisions here, for example, maybe we slim down the cockpit, the survival module. That's a little bit on the wide side. We might want to slim that down to a single occupant. Once that's all resolved, it'll take some real good time next week to start looking at some interior studies. We did some in the past. I'll bring those back so we can review them. But I think some conditions have changed to really change the overall character of what we look at on the interior of this machine as well. So let's get started here. And I want to show you today what it takes and what it's meant by putting together a series of empathic sketches. And empathy is a very interesting approach to design. It's looking at surfaces and very, very emotional exterior piece, for example. It's much more flavorful, much more abstract. It really is, hey, yeah, 75, how are you? Welcome aboard. Just doing a little bit of review here before I move into some speed form studies, and that speed forms are really essentially important in terms of what's the character of the vehicle you're working with. For example, let's go back and look at this this front 3/4 study here. This study has some really, thank you very much. Yeah, good to have you on board. Thank you so much for taking the time. We've done some review here, but I'm going to spend some time today going a little bit more abstract with the overall shape. This is the actual resolve we had yesterday at the end of the stream on this G12 series, looking at a very, very much more tailored overall impact, very lethal looking insect under tension approach to the machine. A lot of time developed this thing, and again, not to be redundant, but I want to make sure, thank you very much. I much appreciate that. Yeah, again, it's really great to have you on board. I hope you enjoy the session here today and stay with us throughout the duration and also next week, and I'll give you the schedule lineup as well. But I think overall, the reason we're so dedicated and delicate about this whole process is this is eventually going to become what I refer to as a product line for Dr. Contrast. And also, we're looking at maybe giving it a branding identity. And out of this whole format, we're going to start developing coupes and sedans and different transportation systems out of it for poster graphics, 3D models, and the like. So it's really interesting how we're going to really take the time to refine this guy. And even though we've gotten there, for example, the width is right, the cockpit's been lowered, it's a lot more streamlined, the intake resolve was really taken care of back here. That really feels much better now. But we're going to do a little section analysis here today on what I refer to as speed forms. So now that you're bringing up to speed, that's where we are. Speed forms, for example, are abstract and very empathic. And empathy meaning, what's the emotion you're trying to get across with this form? What's the overall character going to look like? So I'm going to start using today a little bit of Prismacolor pencil and some Conte crayon. And I want to go through some very quick little strikes and show you how this whole thing begins to work. So let me drop this down a little bit here. Let's get a wheel plant put in. Find it center line. I just want to give ourselves a reference here. So that goes there. That's just one reference. So let's take a look at this Conte crayon piece now. Now that I've got that started, what am I going to look at? Just very simple strikes in terms of that's what we start to look at. I mean, look how interesting that begins. We're going to look at this from the point of view, what do these surfaces start to tell us? What are we looking for in terms of looking at just, again, impact? We can add to it as well. We can kind of come back in and really change the character, looking at some of the elevations we've got studied here. I want to just really look at this. Now, I want to do a couple of pieces here before we get started. Let's do another piece here. Let's get that wheel set. Let's get that center line set. This is going to this will help us dictate the beginning of the whole process here to get these forms to read. So let's get a lot more adventuresome. What does that start to do? I mean, look at the character we're trying to develop here. Are we looking at things like independent floaters? Are we looking at different sponsons and different intake systems and the like? Does this become a razorback? For example, what I mean by razorback, does that surface come up? And instead of closing it off like we did in the first study here, does it now come back in and put the rear wheel in here? So it's almost like an open vacuole. That could be kind of interesting too, wouldn't it? That's kind of neat. We're going to roll that in. And there's my center line. Let's put that same position back in through here. But notice how the overall gesture really starts to tell a story on itself here. And what I'm looking for here today, in addition to what we've already gotten resolved, what kind of things can we add to the overall character of this guy to really make it kind of sing? So I'm going to bring a red pencil in here now and just break up. And then see these little changes of pace here, like this to this? Does that mean that section comes in, rolls over, and then drops in and does that? And then does it kick back underneath? Now be consistent. Does that roll in here and do that and roll underneath even deeper? Does that come across the upper into this real big shoulder, into this negative, for example? Does that change the section here into this and really start to roll? Look how that surface really rolls underneath there and starts to change the direction. Let's go back the other way. Let's go back to this surface, pick up a little bit of that same kind of chemistry and does this. Picks up that little sharp line right here. That ends up here, and then now it starts to reverse itself. Up into here. There's my center line. Let's call that my 50-inch line right here. That's visual zero right there. Everything else is going to shift one way or the other. Let's go back to this. Now, what does this start to do? Does this roll over? Does this kick back in? Does this come back out and pick up that same section? Does that now do this? And then it goes underneath again, and then pick up that same surface. Does that roll over and do this? Pick up that negative. There it is. Does it stay consistent now? Come over the top of this wheel pant. Section, 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 origin, section, section, and then one more up front here, just enough of that. And then this little hook right here, there's a section origin from front to rear. Look how dramatically that thing changes. Now this can go kick back, and this will kick back, and then this, in the end, maybe it has a little bit of that to it, just a little bit of change of pace. Look how those sections begin to alter the overall character of the form itself. So that's what we're trying to look at here as far as section identity goes. And pardon me, we'll pick up a little bit of charcoal or this weaver pad as we go along here. We kind of clean this up a little bit. So there's maybe the first pass at this guy. Now let's look at this guy in section. Now does this get a lot stiffer? Does this stay really severe and do this? And does it do that? Now back into this upper, roll over. Now does it come back underneath? Look how that surface can change and go underneath. Look at an undercut, then back to this vertical again, into this and out. Just changing the sections as we go. Look how this comes in, picks up that negative, comes back out to that. Now into this shelf, then it comes right back and picks up this, and then really cuts back underneath and returns itself. Look how we're changing these sections. This comes back, that comes back, into this, and then back out again, and back out again. Look how that whole surface has changed dramatically. So here's my station point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then last but not least, just a little simple razor back here. Let's change that. There it is. Look how the character changes in there. Now, in the midst of doing that, look what happens here. This now starts to come back in and adds another line. So I can come back in and add another tear line in here by doing this. And put that right back in the shadow. Look at that. Now I can come back in, put a bit of tone in this, and start to illustrate it just a bit. It tells me where that highlight line is. And then this underneath, this is where the surfaces start to come into play. Rolls back, over the top, rolls back, and this could be all wheel back here. This whole thing could just start to go right back in and just close that shape right off. So it's a combination of both emotion, getting the section to change a little bit, getting this form down here to read a little bit more. Look at this, how that just kicks right back in and does that. Then this becomes much more shadow based. Look at the development in that form as a result of letting empathy do its job. I mean, look at the surfaces there. Really dramatic stuff. What do you think, gang? Making sense? How cool is that? You really start to take advantage of some very, this could be generation 2, for example, we're working on. I'm not suggesting by any means here at all that we're going to actually take change and charge this thing and make some real adjustments to it. Let's just kind of do some things up in here too. Let's kind of get this into a form study. You know, this that comes over the top into shadow. What does that start to do? Maybe it picks up that same line there. And again, into the intake. Now, it's still pretty bold. Into the shadow up on top. And again, just very simple, straightforward little rendering exercise here once we get the empathy down. But notice, look at what's beginning to happen. Look at the shadow right here, that undercut, that underbelly, into that return. Back in through here. And again, just a little bit more of where that tire is. Let's kind of ground this guy now. Still trying to maintain some of the overall personality that we established in that first shape that we showed just from the result of yesterday's studies. But look at how interesting things begin to happen once you lay a little bit of empathy down and get a lot more character into the form itself. Let's kind of put this down to ground, shadow it, give it a base, put the rest of that tire in place just to kind of, let's give a little bit of perspective to it. So it's got a little bit of a normal stance. Same with this guy back here. A little bit of tire. And again, a little bit of perspective. Now, those of you out there, if you're still there, what do you think? Is this making sense now as far as looking at for a search into some form development and adding some little bit of sophistication as we go through the process here? Let me just stop for a moment and see if this is making sense for you here. The intent is to get a lot more character out of this next generation we're going to move into A lot of dramatic stuff taking place here. So it's all part of the whole process of really taking advantage of what empathy means. And once again, by you're looking at empathic sketches, you're not looking at the actual vehicle itself. You're looking at what it represents, what the character is, what its overall intent is, what its personality is. So let's go back and go back through, and there's one. Let's see if we can develop that a little bit. Let's come back in here and do another study. Get this all set. Let's kind of just lay down a ground line. You got a sharp stick here. We go through about 2 or 3 to a page. Again, looking at section study and analysis and moving into speed forms. And the reason we're doing this, when we're all said and done, the reason we're going to develop a speed form character is that eventually that speed form is going to become a 3D printed model. So we'll take the very essence of the actual shape itself. Hey, hi Brad, how are you? Doc, sorry I can't be on for this stream. I'll be watching the replay. Hey, no problem. I hope you're doing well. Hi Brett, thanks for tuning in. And so again, we're going to build a series of 3D models, printed models on this whole lineup here. Just again, and the reason we're going to a very different approach as far as the speed form is concerned, we don't want to get into a lot of detail as far as the overall shape of the final renderings are going to be. But what's its character? What are we trying to sell as its essence? So let's go back in and develop a couple more. Let's give ourselves that reference. There it is. Front center line. Well, it kind of gives us a starting point where we start to build these forms. Let's go back to this whole concept again of getting this the contacrane to work. Now, look what begins to happen there. All these weights are really starting to tell us a story. Weights meaning, for example, what's the shadow line doing in through here? What's positive or negative? Is that the line we're after? For example, is this the one we're after? Or is that upper going to be? Does that blade come out? How do we fill in the gaps here? What is that floater doing through here? Is it this the line? Is that a little bit of space in there? A little bit of airspace is going to tell us where the upper brake is going to go to. So let's line this up a little bit here. And put that rear wheel in place, give it some scale. And it's going to come over the top, and that's okay. Look at the character change here. Let's kind of go back to this, find that center line. And again, let's do another line down here, just to kind of keep ourselves moving with this whole concept of empathy, spirit. What does it feel like? What does it start to tell? How's that story being told? What are we after here? Front wheel's a reference. Always use that just as a 0 point. That's going to become my magic center line, or not my center line, but my actual point of origin, where this thing's going to begin. It's going to give me a sense of where the scale is in proportion. So all the way through this guy, let's go back in and pick up, again, some of that same process. Look what happens in those sketches. Look at the strikes in there. Is that making sense? It's a really interesting set of circumstances here. We're not really saying it's finished or melodic. It's just that the overall concept is, again, sort of be redundant, but it really comes down to this whole process of being emotional, getting just simple lines down and not worrying about details and finishing out where all these things are. Look at this, for example. That upper piece could roll in and pick up this little vortex over the top of this. And again, much more severe in the rear tail section. Do we want to take the second generation into something that looks like this? Same fin. Let's kind of go back in and put this piece in place. Look at this. When you lay that in, look how the proportion really changes. Kind of gives it a body now. Let's kind of rotate this just a little bit. Let's put a little bit of sketch to it. A little bit of perspective in it, just to give it a grounding. Same thing up front here. Let's do the same thing up on top. Let's get that second little piece, a little bit of perspective in this guy. Just enough to separate itself. There it is, and there it is. Front end. Now let's go back in and look at some section. Let's get there it is, coming in here just a little bit. What do you think, gang? Now look at the spring line here. That's interesting. What if we took that line, let's say we kind of roll out of this, let's go a lot more slope. This is a lot more slope of a surface. Then we warp it just a bit, start to stiffen it up and over the top, underneath, back out again. Developing that sponson. This is where I'm standing. This is my 0 station right here. That's where I am. Let me turn this just for a moment. Get a nice just straight line in there. There's my 0 station. I'm going to come back in now with this. It rolls over, cuts underneath, picks up that shoulder. Now picks up this real strong overhang. Back underneath into this. Look at this. Over the top, into this. Underneath. And then back out again. And then over the top, underneath. Look at the stations. I'm there, there, there. Section, cut, section, section, and cut. And then add one more. I mean, look at the variation and theme in there. Really interesting. Look how much quicker this whole form gets. Now, does that mean, for example, we lost some of the intake? No. We come back in. Let me clean this up just a bit here. We come back in, and just for a moment, let's put a little bit of theme in this thing. What if I use this and pick up some of that intake, like we had in the original concept. Again, looking at generation changes here. Maybe that's where the impact is. Let's come back into shadow here. This goes into shadow. This fills in the gap here. This comes along, and now maybe does that. And again, look at this, upper. Filling with the rear wheel is going to be just a little bit of exposed back in through here, and then down below on the ground. Back in through here. And a little bit over the top of that shoulder, just to get that form to soften off and come back in and really work with us here. Look at that. A lot more depth in here. And really take advantage of that overhang. I mean, look at the character beginning to be developed in these sketches. I'm gonna stop here for a moment. Yeah. If you're still there, what do you think? Is this kind of hitting some nerves for you here? Very spooky process, but so vital in terms of putting together a really interesting shape and form here. Anybody? And that's that. There we are. There's the top piece right there. Look at the character we're starting to develop in this stuff. Really, really interesting. Notice how it all kind of flows into a certain amount of rhythm. What happens in here, for example, that might disappear. Let's kind of finish this off here. That kind of might come do this, and then just roll out of that. That could be a hidden shell. That could be the nose cap. And then this portion right here can come out and be the actual sponson. So now let's do that. Look at this, underneath shadow. Return, really strong shadow in here. So this is a process showing you today, a combination of how to work with empathy to get a character down, then using that character to kind of define where some of these surfaces and shapes are going to end up. So let's put a little bit of upper in this thing, take it through. And let's get that shelf right there. Let's end that. Look at that. And again, let's return that right in through here. How really dramatic is that? So let's do this. A little bit of grounding to it. There's some really powerful statements being made, especially back in through here. And don't misunderstand. I'm not. Oh, this is really cool and glorifying. I'm not. That's not the intent. The intent is to look at this very, very solid statement we made. For example, the initial concept of going back in there and saying, boy, we've got some pretty brutal looking surfaces here, but what if we took it a step further and stepped out a little bit more and did some really interesting things with it? For example, let's do this. We get this thing. Now look at the character. This next generation, we could start here with that. That's going to be resolved. But then in the next generation, look at the character we're starting to develop in some of these shapes. Same overall sway line, same basic gesture, but bringing it a little forward. Maybe this terminates and we pick up the fender line as it comes across here again. Pardon me, just for a moment here. Let's go back and put a little bit of section to this thing. Let's come back in and go extremely fluid here. Let's go rounder, into rounder, flatter, and then underneath, out, back in again, and then under, and then back out underneath. Now reversing the section, up over the top, into cut, into body, underneath, into body, back out again, and again, that, and then let's just do one here just to show where that section does down below. That cuts in here, goes out, and then comes back out again. So that's what that section is going to do. And really interesting stuff. Again, notice a little bit of a change of, let's add a little bit of a design line in through here. Let's kind of terminate this. Let's say that this comes in, rolls over the top of that wheel form, and then picks up a lot of visual tension right in there. I mean, look at that little winglet right there. Boy, how cool does that be? Same with this. Now we cantilever. I mean, look at the forms we're starting to develop in there by changing some of the overall personality. Very, 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 very interesting. So let's kind of go back and finish this guy here. Put a little bit of section, one more cut in here. And as it rolls back, and then it comes up underneath, and there it is. Let me clean this up just a bit. We're getting a little bit of the content coming all over the sketch itself. Clean this up as we go here. Pardon me. So there's two series being done right there that really kind of tell a real solid story. Look how much quicker and much more lucid they're becoming now. Again, empathy. The idea of getting a spirit down on paper and not worrying about a lot of detail. What's its character? What's the gesture? Is it subtle? Is it supple? Is it energetic? Is it sheer? Is it soft? Is it aggressive? Is it passive? These are terms we work with in terms of developing design ideas as we go here. So let's go back through one more time here. Let's go back and pick up another couple of pages here. Let's go back and get a line down, and then we'll do this. Let's just get that baseline down. And again, down here, we'll do 2 to a page just to get some spirit down and find out where we're going to take this thing in the next generation. G12. Now we're going to come up with our own name too. I'm still trying to figure out what to call this thing in terms of name. It's an origin-based offshoot and redesign, but we want to develop our own product line here. So we're trying to look at something that's a little bit more friendly or related to what we do day to day here in the office at the Ford system. I thought about a lot of different variations on theme, but I think the one thing that I always come back to, we keep it nice and simple and highly aggressive. Maybe it's under one umbrella, like FM1, for example, Ford's Motorsports 1, something of that nature. We have a definite logo and identity, and out of that FM1 character or company comes these ideas in terms of putting together product forms and illustration work and design services and so forth. So let's go back here and let's get that wheel set. That's going to be my armature. That's my pivot point. There's my center line right there. Now I'm going to use that contact crane now again to come back in and start to develop some shape. A little sharper here. Let's go back to that. Now again, different bulk. Look at the difference in the masses there. It really starts to tell a story. Does this bevel back? Is that almost like a Rolls-Royce curtain back here? I'm not sure what we're after here. Let's go back and look at this another pass here and just do this. Let's get the center line down. And what if we just really truncate the whole idea? Let's put that upper in place right here. Really simple. Look how we've opened that form up. What's it telling us in terms of where to fill in the blanks here? We're going to find out in a moment here. I'm going to come back in and just start adding some sections on this thing. And first of all, let's lay this in place. Let's put this in place here. Let's put that rear wheel, maybe that exposed a little bit over the top. There I am there. That's that piece. Then again, back in through here. Same proportion. Just kind of planning in where those wheels are, front and rear. There's my center line. There's my ground line here. I want to burn that in. A little bit of perspective in this thing. Showing a bit of the far side wheel. Same in here. Might see a little bit more of that because we're going to use it as an undercut right in through here. That's interesting. Like a little return sponson, shadow line or drop line, the ground. Boy, I mean, this is exciting. I mean, to me, it's exciting because you're looking at the unknown. For example, what are we going to make out of these things? Does it get too busy? Does it not tell a story? Now, look at this. automatic intake right there. Just kind of ink that in. Intake. That would be a variation on where we were here. Here's the sketch we're springboarding off of. But look how that's beginning to work here in terms of, all right, there's first generation. Now, maybe the second generation has that kind of character going on for it. Really, and this is like a movable flap of some sort. Really interesting. Let's go back and continue on with this. Same with this guy. Look at this. Maybe this now becomes, let's use this. Look at this as an intake. Maybe that services the engine. That's an intake bay. Very cool. Look at the difference in variation there. Now, in between all this, let's get some section down. Extreme. Hold back. Again, notice this. Out, back out again. In, back out again. In, back out. Look at the section changes here. This to this. Back out. Over the top. So get that cantilever. Now, really roll that top off. Really roll this off. Much softer on top and much more sheer or sheerer in the body sides. Now, back to this. Here's my center line right here. I'm going to start coming the other way, round, into this body form. Look at this now, back to really sheer. There's my zero. That's where, pardon me, as I turn here, that's where I'm standing, or that's the center line of the vehicle, the center of gravity. I'm going to come back in now. This, really interesting. Now that cuts underneath again. Comes back in, cuts underneath again. This piece rolls over, maybe it gets a little stiffer as it goes back and just opens right up and just gives us that. Comes back into this, into that, into the intake, and look at the difference in that character. And this comes right back and just solves all these problems for us. I mean, look at that. Now, we put a little bit of surface into this thing. Look what begins to happen. Upper canopy area. Cantilever, just enough of that, just to kind of take off on this thing. Look at that. There's that floating canopy. It's a little bit further in the middle of the machine, but we can move it forward as we go here. Now, this, into that shoulder. Into the shadow. Much more definition here. Look at this sponson, how it just changed. That's a sponson right there. That's really, really interesting. Back into this. Show us a little bit of the rear tire exposed. That's okay. Exposed. And again, right back into here with a real solid change of pace. And now that comes right back and just really creates a load back here. And that gets much more streamlined. But again, look at the forms in that thing. Really interesting. That's what we're doing here. We're looking at, again, a series of, again, a long time ago, Sid Mead, for example, was a genius at this stuff. Sid was an absolute master at empathy. He would put together surfaces and change of pace using emotion. He wasn't really thinking about cars or vehicles, which I'm not here. I'm not thinking about, in essence, yes, it's a G12, but I'm not thinking about what we've already done. I'm looking at what the next generation might begin to look like. And that's what I'm trying to play up on this series of sketches here. So let's go back into this guy. Let's finish some things off here. Look at this. Let's roll that down, finish that form off. Let's take that a little bit further, extend it. I can start to modify the shape now. This form comes in. That's my intake. Now look at this. And now my upper is full forward. This is all canopy. And the body side. And the return in the underside. And this is a sponson. I mean, look at the surfaces that's starting to generate. It really looks lethal. Fun stuff. I mean, to me, it's an intriguing process. I never tire of using it, looking for new shape and form. It's one of those that really, it's difficult to describe. And again, the best way I can describe it is you're not looking, again, to resolve an automobile. You're looking for a character. What's its personality going to be? And again, that's the reason, empathy, very emotional when it comes down to putting together the pieces. And I certainly want to stress, for example, as we go through this, let me get rid of some of the debris here. We go through this today, we're not saying that we're living in the world of this is final design. We're living in the world of what's going to be coming next. How do we transform from where we are? into another series of things. For example, next generation of race. These are GT machines, for example. Now, as we pass through this and get some of these things resolved, we do a series of mainline coupes and sedans, SUVs, off-road vehicles, space vehicles, and so forth. I mean, the whole product line is going to be generated out of this whole rework of the G12 series here. So let's go back and put a little bit of stick on this thing, some sections on this beauty. Let's come out in this rolls over, a little bit rounder. That comes out, rolls over, undercut, sorry about that, undercut this, under again, back out again, into this shoulder, out, into that shoulder, a little tear line there. Now we're going to reverse it. We're going to take that inside, pick up this form here, and then pick up the canard. This is the way I'm going to switch gears. Here's my 0 right here. That's where I'm standing. I'm going to cut those sections. Now I'm going to start change the orientation as I go rearward. This happens here. It's going to come in, reverse, underneath, deck, undercut, into body form, into undercut. I mean, look at that. Look at that section. I mean, that's you don't get that. I'm going to really stress this. Hopefully, I can say this properly. You don't get that newness, for example, in that section, isolating it by just drawing in a typical format in perspective. You get that character by using empathy, because of all the thicks and thins, the tone changes in the line you're using with contact grain really start to tell an incredible story, and it changes the way you see things. And that's what to me, that's where the beauty is. Again, section, undercut, back out again, into this large flat, underneath again, into the intake, back out again, and again, this canard, I'm going to change gears. I'm going to pick this canard up by doing the following. I'm going to take that line right there and bring it right on through and extend it. I can do that. That's empathy. I come back in again, body side. Just keep a nice simple slab into the offset and into that canard, I mean, look at, and again, a little turn right there, that little return right there gives me another little window of changing like a sponson character on the back of that vehicle. But look at the sections in those. They're very simple, they're common sections, but they're new in terms of what the empathy generated for us. So that to me is exciting stuff, gang. So let's go back, clean this up just a bit, and we'll try one more page and see what you think. Get some appraisal from the audience here. If you're still tuned in, I really would appreciate what you think so far, what you're seeing. In fact, I'm going to stop just for a moment here and let you take advantage of that time frame. Let me get rid of a fresh sheet of paper. To get my fingers all straightened out would be good. What's the stick? There it is. Let's start another sheet of paper here. There it is. And then I'm going to bring these all together here so we can show where the generations are. That's where we were. This is where we started. That was 1. That's 2. And this one we just finished was 3. By the way, before I go any further, I always like to do this too to kind of make sure the history stays intact. Pardon me when I just do a little bit of house cleaning here. This is sketch 1. So I just want to make sure we keep the sequence proper. So there's 1. There's 2. And then last but not least, here's 3. So there we are. That's the generation we've had thus far. So let's try one more here and start to really fill in the blanks about where we are here. Let's see. Let's kind of sharpen this up a little bit. If they lay the baseline down. Let's get that tire in place. Front wheel. That's my reference point. Again, working with a black Prismacolor pencil just to get this kind of keynoted and get this thing started. Then we're going to switch gears and go to contact grain and get some really good sharp thick and thins here. Let's kind of slow the essence down here a little bit, get more of a spirit. Let's see if we can get more thick and thin in this guy. There's another quick sketch, a little empathy study. Notice the tension between here and here. Let's go back into another one here. Let's get a little bit of baseline down. And back to ground. Get that reference down. There's my front wheel. Now let's see if we can kind of accomplish maybe some minimal lines here to really kind of take advantage of this guy. There's another. Looking at just how to get really spooky with this guy and open it up a little bit. So let's kind of call that 1 and 2. Let's place this guy in perspective, put some reference to it here. Let's lay in the rear wheels. There's a reference. Getting back to ground. That rear wheel exposed just a little bit. That's okay. We're doing a GT variation here. That's fine. Now this we want to do is just kind of cut the nose, that little chamfer as it breaks. So let's do this. Let's get that to work. Draw a thread line here. Start the section. Break line. Break line. Break line. Undercut. Undercut. Back out again. Undercut. Into upper. Into upper. This is my 0 section. It comes in and does that. That's 0. I'll come back the other way now. I'm going to drape this shape over. That whole upper comes up, rolls underneath, picks up this guy, comes underneath, rolls over again, picks up that, a little quicker here, rolls underneath. Now back out to this section. Comes uphill, undercuts, stays flat, up, undercuts, stays flat. Now, and through here, we can add something like this. We can say, okay, let's project that line through. Now, this becomes my intake. Real fast sketches here. That's the inside piece. Now, look at the drama there. Now we've got some things to work with here. Let's going to add this. Let's take this little canopy over the top. Let's take a little foil over the top of the wheels. Look at that. Now let's put a little bit of shape into this thing. Offset. Into upper. Last little bit of that cantilever, which I want to get back to. And again, back to canard. We're still going to change that section from that to that to that. There's my point, reference, 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 there, 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 and for all intents and purposes there. And look at the difference in that character. All of a sudden, things got some real wicked looking form studies here. So let's go back in here and lay this one down. Now let's get this down. There's my upper right here. That's canopy. Now into this. Intake. Surface. Back in the surface again. And the underbody. Let's take advantage of this. Here again, folks, just using that whole process of empathy to help me determine where some of these shapes are going to go. I mean, look how simple, again, that is. And yet, hopefully, it really begins to tell a story very quickly here. So let me go back and pardon me here for, let's get some of this debris off of here, clean it up just a little bit. So let's do this. Let's get rid of some of the debris here, folks. Thank you for giving me the minute here to kind of clean my mess up. So once again, I'll just appeal, for those of you out there in the audience, if you're still there, I really would appreciate your opinion of this. What do you think? Let me know one way or the other how you feel about what this empathy is doing for us. Once again, I know I said it throughout the course of the day here, or the stream, but I really want to stress, for example, this is not an exercise in doing automotive illustration. This is an exercise in looking at the spirit of a form, looking for the essence of what we're trying to develop into the next generation of this product line we're trying to establish. I mean, it's just a very, very unique approach to developing character without getting caught up in all the nuances of final design and so forth. We're not looking at final design yet. We're looking at theme. Ground line. A little bit of perspective in the far side wheel. Get that thing to hit the ground. Same thing over here. Let's get that set. And far side tire. Ground line. Far side wheel. Now let's put a little bit of section in that lower piece, see what we come up with here. Very exciting looking shapes in terms of what the empathy is trying to tell us here. So let's go back in through here. Let's do this. Let's reverse this section. Let's cut this back. Let's cut this back. There's my 0. That's where I'm standing. That's almost a midsection of the machine. Now let's come back the other way. Cantilever, back into this platform, up over this hip, into this lower piece. And again, section, section. The whole thing, just keep it nice and simple. Just waterfall that whole shape all the way back. Look at that. I mean, pretty simple back here, but yet very organic up front. And I think that's one of the nice balancing points about what we're after here. Let's kind of get this guy to read a little more of that, that, and that. Here's my reference. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 sections. Just walking that surface back, going from front to rear. So that's that. When it's all said and done. And let's do this. And we'll just take a minute, just clean up some of the debris here, and take a pause and get hopefully some input from you out there in the audience, and those of you who are listening to the stream today. Really appreciate your input on this thing, because it's a very delicate set of circumstances to work with. Hopefully we're not dealing with a lot of design, so to speak, but dealing with every ounce of our energy in developing a spirit to get a character down on paper, to really tell a story about what this G12 process is going to look like in the next generation. And perhaps, if things work out rather nicely, what it might look like in the present generation too. So let's go back and so let's hold on for a second. I'm gonna hold up just for a bit here, take a bit of a break, and get your input on what you've seen and what you witnessed here. Hopefully, if you're out there, please feel free to comment. I'm looking for. I really love the interaction when you feed back and forth about design or how you see certain things, what your character is, or what you're representing. Love to hear that. Let me give you a moment here. Well, again, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time, Yaya, if you're still there, 75015, to join us today. I hope this has been enjoyable for you. It's really been a treat for me to put together this whole process. Since I've been on Twitch for the last few months, it's really been interesting in terms of what is taking place. And I think developing and keeping a series together, for example, like this G12 GTR platform piece has really been intriguing. We started it last year, did some final pieces on it, but I'll show you where we were last year. It was more of this kind of look. It just didn't have the same kind of panache to it. I don't want to take the time to, oh yeah, here it is. It didn't have the same kind of panache to it. This is where we were last year. It was more of that type of personality. That was a final design rendering of that guy. And in addition to that, we did a couple of interior or exterior rear three-quarter pieces. And to our surprise, I mean, I've got to dig this one out here. We used this guy as a theme. We started looking at this as a rear three-quarter study in that same G12, a little bit of color. This is the thing we're going to be working toward, getting some color illustrations like this in print form of the new design. So that's where the rear three-quarter was, and that's where we were, for example, in the overall intent of the original G12. But I think you can see by going back into some of these sketches we did earlier today, some of this stuff has just taken on a whole different character. This whole idea, for example, this front three-quarter is so much more powerful now in terms of what we're after as far as the final design intent is concerned. It's still very low profile, meets all the requirements, has a little bit of that origin look to it, the shark look. Very, very stealth, very insect-like, very under tension. Great process, I think, made over the last few days since we started this rework. And so we've carried that on today by going into some empathy. And again, in review here, in closing things down, it's a very touchy subject matter, empathy is, because it's so rarely used, and I think that's unfortunate. Hey, Pixel, how are you? Doctor, good to see you. I'm just wrapping some things up here, Pixel. I decided today to go back in and spend a little bit of time doing some very essential speed form studies here based on the original concept. This is where we ended up yesterday, Pixel, with the actual G12 front three-quarter. If I can find the rest of these sketches, we'll kind of dig them out. And yeah, there we are. This is where we were at the front three-quarter. This is where we were in the rear three-quarter. Just kind of really tune things in a little bit. We got a lot crisper with this guy, much more fluid. Less busy, less static, a lot more mean character to it. And I think the overall intent was to maintain some of the G12 character, but refine some things and give it more romance or much more character. So that's where we were with that guy. And then I generated a real quick plan view yesterday, but I'm not quite there yet, Pixel. What I want to do is begin to slim it up a little bit and extend a little bit. But I think that's the basic overall character we have in the plan view. Maybe at the same time minimize the center module just a touch. But excuse me, briefly, the black line represented where we were overall in terms of packaging is concerned. I went back and looked at the IMSA blueprint for overall dimensions for the competition. Not to exceed 185 in length, not to exceed 76 inches in width. We're just a little wider here, so the red line represents where we are in terms of bringing it back into that format for registration. But I still think we can slim this up a little bit here and extend it a little bit. We're about maybe 10 to 20 inches shy. So the longer it gets and the slimmer it gets, I think the more evil it's going to become. So there's a plan view study. All that to say that we used that as a springboard for today's stream, and I'll go back in order here. Today's stream is getting into what I refer to as empathic study sketches, and I think just a really intriguing set of circumstances to work with here. So let me go back in order where we started. Went from there, started there, and went to that. That was 2. There we go. I'll just bring up the speed here, Pixel. Hopefully not to bore you to death here, but here it is. We started looking at a whole new start. What's the next generation going to look like? By using empathy, here's where we started, for example. Laying down the theme line, finding where the center line of front tire is, and then taking advantage of the same maybe overall form, but just adding some characterization changes. Do we need them? Just really interesting. Do we need to make some maybe this is second or third generation coming into play here too, Pixel. So I just want to tell the audience and working with the people that we've been working with the last couple of days, that it's a real, really interesting set of circumstances when you work with empathy. It's not a car sketch. It's not a final drawing. It's an emotion. What are you trying to look at? What's the character? What's the personality like? What are we looking for in terms of overall shape? So I started here with the first set of empathy sketches, then laid down a couple of strike lines, and went back in and added some section to it in red, and then added a little bit of tone to it. So it's a combination of both empathy, excuse me, and some real loose sketch rendering stuff. So there was phase 1. Then we went to this one, phase 2, a little more dramatic. All of a sudden, really interesting surfaces changes. And I think that's the great thing about working with a contact grain, is it changes weights, and it goes thick and thin, and it can really begin to develop some really interesting forms here where you wouldn't get that with a basic sketch, because you're tuned in on the perspective, but not the emotion. Yeah, perspective is emotional, don't misunderstand me, but that's the same as empathic emotion. Empathic emotion is how you feel about what you're seeing. What's its character? A perspective is a finalization of what you have seen, so it becomes past tense. So let's do this. There's the second one I cranked out on. This is the third one we just did. So really, look at the rollover in that. That could be really interesting back and through. That plane rolls over the rear wheels. It's a really interesting stuff. You wouldn't get that with a typical sketch. So again, the purpose of today's stream was, what does Speedform contract do for us? What does it tell us what we're after? These are essential sketches where, again, we're going to really keep simplifying down to get that 3D model. So that was the third page we did. And the one I just wrapped up, excuse me, just a couple of moments ago, Pixel, was this. Again, really dramatic shape changes. I mean, overall, dropping the body form down. And this is a centerline piece here. Remember, that just floats over the top of the rear wheels. Again, character changes, just amazing what it does for you. So a new way to see, new way to think, and really, no, without question, a new way to put new things into action. So that's what we're here for, putting the Forge gang up front and the Dr. Contrast brand identity really up front and doing some really cool stuff. And I think I mentioned early on in the stream too, Pixel, about maybe come up with a really neat name for this whole product line. Thought about doing FM1, Forge Motorsports 1, and putting a logo together, or something of that nature that brings it under one umbrella. Because out of this, I think we could develop a series of print work on both the G12 we're working on now. Maybe develop our own line of coupes and sedans and some little 3D printed models. Who knows? But I think it needs some sort of identity. So that's where we are today here, guys. I'm going to stop right there for a moment and just take a second to sincerely thank you for joining forces with me today. It's been a real joy, and thank you so much, Pixel. I know you're very busy, for joining in, and hope this has been of some really some help to you. What do you think of the empathy stuff, Pixel? Making sense? Really appreciate your input. You're a design guy, and I think you'll begin to see some of the ramifications of what the message is here about generating newness and getting it all put together. Yeah, thank you very much. It's a lot of fun. So, again, all that to say that thank you so much for the time here, guys. And if Yaya75015 is still on board, thank you so much for joining forces and following today. I really appreciate that. The top one's your favorite? No kidding. That's pretty cool. Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of drape in this. And just dropping that body form off and then coming across to the flat and then picking up something like a centerline bone of some sort could be really interesting. It's really, to me, it's captivating. I use this all the time. For those of you listening, I use this all the time to develop new shape and form, then convert it into surface and into perspective sketches. A great tool developed by Sid Mead years and years ago. The guy was an absolute genius. So, all of you, again, thank you for joining in, Pixel especially. Hope you have a great rest of the day. And for those of you who are for the first time coming in, I always tune up. Oh, by the way, if you have any questions or concerns or things you want me to do or would like to work with, and some ideas, feel free to visit me at my website. My email address is jim@drcontrast.com. If you're interested in some drawing cycles and so forth, and some learning process, I have a drcontrast.com. There's a very, very simple 9-lesson entry-level program on everything from perspective to light source to surface work. Feel free to look at that. I also have a store with some print work on it, and we're working on a store here for this one here with the Forge group here on board. So. All that to say, it's been a lot of fun today. I thought we'd just change pace and get, since we've got the final again resolved here, we finally have a good look at what we're after in terms of what the shape is going to become. For example, let me dig it out again. This is where we are now with a really interesting front three-quarter study. That thing all of a sudden now has some real character. Now we're going to refine it, get in some color rendering work, and maybe on next Tuesday's stream start doing some interior work. I did some last year, some interior work, but it needs to be refined a little bit. So we'll use this package now to kind of look at that as one more step at it here. So all that to say, thank you very much for joining me today. Great fun to be with you, as it always is. And I always sign off with this, because I think it's the most important part of the whole chat, and it's simply this. Please, never forget to remember to dare to be great, because you are. Thanks very much, gang. Have a great evening. We'll see you Tuesday at 2:30. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.